It is a minor miracle. I have a brand new Honda Accord here, which I didn't think was ever gonna happen. I've had about 6 billion emails and text messages saying, when am I gonna have this? And here it is, thanks to this gentleman for bringing out his own personal car.
You're welcome, I'm happy to be here.
So this is probably gonna be one of your last Honda products. Why is that?
I had a very bad experience with Honda, particularly with the TLX from Acura. The car was a total lemon. I spent 4 months in other service departments. Honda wouldn't take ownership of the issue and lost a lot of money on it.
So now you're in this brand new Accord?
Yes, I'm in this. This is my last chance to Honda. It's good.
That's like a repeating pattern with many of us that are Honda loyalists. Between Misha, myself, and Jack Singapore, we've owned over 50 Honda and Acura products, from NSX, S2000, Fits, Accords, Civics, you name it, we've had it. So let's just skip that, get into the review of this lovely Accord Sport with a 6-speed manual. Behind the wheel of the new Accord, if you're somebody that has been exposed to previous iterations or generations, you're going to notice something major here. That Honda has seemingly learned from their mistakes. Like the past generation having that stupid dual screen that clutters the entire interior. They've improved it here. They've simplified it thanks to some of the technology implementation. Now it's back to the basics. What's always worked and made Honda great in terms of interior design: simplified ergonomics. You have rotary knobs for your HVAC controls, driver, passenger, and fan speed, and simple buttons that you can easily recognize what the hell is going on, and a little LED or LCD display so you don't have to look at the infotainment for your temperature. Speaking of the infotainment, we have a volume knob, a tuning knob, something we've had in cars since 1800s. You have physical buttons for pretty much all the modes, and then you have to deal with touchscreen for the rest of it, which in this setup, it's pretty quick. Honestly, swiping across, menu jumping, getting in, you can kind of figure out what's going on here. It's very kind of smartphone-esque. And granted, you know, the graphics aren't the greatest on here, but the black levels are good. It's a vibrant screen. Again, you're not gonna be totally annoyed by using it. And this is the first Honda product that they have allowed for over-the-air updates on, which means you can literally update this wirelessly when you connect to, obviously, a wireless connection, or if you have telematics in here, Honda will push you out the latest updates to make sure your head unit is not a total shit show in a couple years. Next, in terms of technology, is the instrument cluster. Most of it is digital. And the way that you get around it might be confusing at first because you have to use this rotary knob and then you have to push it into select, the back and the home, but a lot of that functionality mirrors what is in the infotainment. So once you get used to the menus, it's very simple to get around and choose what you want to change, like your display settings for tachometer and all the little safety stuff that's in there. And then they kind of keep the physical buttons that you've been used to. Like if you want to tweak your safety button, it's here on the left by your left knee. Same thing with your traction control. Your dimmer switch is a rotary button, your trip button. So they've kept the core functions that you use all the time as physical controls, and they don't muck up that formula like they have in the past. And I think that's one of the best parts about this interior. Now it's time to talk about comfort and cargo capacity, or human capacity. In previous generations, the Accords kept getting bigger and bigger, and then you got on the inside and you're like, well, they didn't really maximize the space they had. That ends with this generation. It looks huge on the outside, and it's big on the interior. If you're somebody that is constantly looking for that larger car to fit your 7-foot frame, or if you've tacked on a couple extra pounds and you're at 800 pounds now, you're probably gonna fit in here. And the seats, they're super comfortable. With this, it has this cloth center, which is great. It's really breathable. It eliminates the need for heaters and coolers, especially in the summer. I haven't burned my ass once. And it's one of the first cars I've been in where you can literally recline the seat back all the way flat In fact, I put Jack in the back, reclined in his lap, and of course I got a massage, and it's just remarkable how much space there is in here. The trunk is the same way. It's got the biggest cargo capacity in the class. I've been able to put everything in there. And I'm not even going to talk about it, but I soaked some wieners, some footlongs in there for a couple days, and they stretched out and blew up, and I can still have space for other stuff. But let's talk about some of the other details before we go into the shop. Now there's two other things to talk about. Like the shifter. The owner said, well, the shift knob came loose from the factory, which isn't really a big deal, but it's one of these silly things. And I found that it has come loose even though I've tightened it while I'm driving. I hate that. It just doesn't give you a good sense of confidence when you're shifting. This is subtleties. It's not really deal breaker stuff. The other part was, this is an Android head unit, and a lot of people have rooted it to be able to take advantage of side-loading apps and stuff like that. So that's kind of a neat thing if you're looking to buy this and keep it long-term. But one of the annoying things that I found, and I think this is just so cheesy, and it reminds me of like the Chrysler LeBaron back in the day, is it has a voice that talks to you. Like in this case.
Please release the parking brake.
It tells you when your parking brake is on and all these other little subtleties. And I think it's sexist because it's a female voice by default. What if I want a man talking to me? What if I wanted this to be a man's car? No, I got to listen to this woman telling me what I need to do with my parking brake. But other than that, really, this is one of the best Honda interiors I've ever been in. And I think they did a great job, and they're totally in the right direction. And it's good to see them fixing the things that were wrong with it and making it all right. And I think most of the people that buy the Accord love it for this reason. Let's head into the shop and take a look at the underbody. Now it's time to take a look at the new Accord on the bend pack lift. And granted, this is not so new anymore, but it's new to me. And it's time to talk about why this is the most advanced Honda Accord ever made. And there is plenty to go over. I'm not going to go over all of it because it's going to look like a Honda sales pitch if I do. So what makes this special? This is the first time Honda has used structural body adhesives on an Accord. And a lot of this is to increase rigidity without having to use as much high-strength steel. It reduces NVH and noise. They've injected hollow points of the frame and the body structure with acoustic foams. And even just looking at it, certain pinch welds are more tight, there's less air gaps all along the body, and they're using NVH materials to flow air from the front to the back. You have plastic pieces to metal pieces to the carpeted, the underbody carpeted or asphalt looking panels that are in the wheel wells all the way back. And this is one of the big reasons why this car has such a big wow factor when you get behind the wheel for the first time. You're like, this isn't what you typically associate with a Honda product or an Accord of the past. And before I even looked at the underbody, I could tell just driving it for the first time. Now, before I move to the front suspension, you'll notice a subtlety here. This belly pan. Typically, you will see the entire front half of the car covered up where you have to remove a pan to drain your oil. And Honda has been very nice to cut this pan in half and leave you an area to get to the oil filter and the oil drain plug here without removing anything. And they've even accommodated this by putting a little airflow cover here to help flow the air over the pan and smooth it out. They also have wheel spats on the front to direct air and active shutters if you get the lesser trim levels. On the Sport, it does not have the active shutters. But suspension. And when you look at this, you're like, oh, it looks like every other car. In a lot of cases, that's true. You just have a strut front suspension, a cast steel knuckle, and you don't have adaptive dampers here, which I think is, I hate to say this, but I feel like this car could utilize it, at least in the Sport trim. But with aluminum control arms, it also connects to an aluminum subframe where your steering rack is hard mounted there. And this is to help improve steering feel without adding a ton of isolation or bushings. They control NVH through the control arm bushings, and they slightly tune that along with the way that they've done the steering to make you feel something. And it does have Honda steering. If you like that, it still translates from the older cars to here. It still has that Honda feel to it. Now I'm going to move towards the back of the car, and we're going to talk about the rear half. In the back, you're going to find a multi-link. A multi-link connected to an aluminum knuckle. And there are so many arms and little tweaks here with the trailing arm and how all this is connected. You'd be surprised it even works. But this is also one of the main reasons why the Accord has always handled well and has been very composed over all pavement types. There's plenty of room because pretty much in every single facet, the new Accord is larger, except its overall length, but it's bigger in every single dimension. But you can see how much room is back here to work, which is great for suspension design. Of course, you don't have to jam everything in a compact package. Now, airflow was a big deal. One of the things you won't see are covers over the lower control arms. And that's because they were able to get the load floor, or the floor underneath here, pretty flat, the muffler design flat, and also because they use these fake exhaust tips, it smooths out airflow off the back of the mufflers using those. And the second point is, and I was talking with the owner about this, we're seeing more and more fake exhaust tips. And some of the reasons why they're doing this is because it reduces the black soot effect that accumulates on the chrome aspects of the car. And you can see just how not connecting the tips allows for some of the moisture and soot to kind of drip down the muffler, and you don't see it on the outside of the car. So, you may not like it, but there's some practical effects of that. Now, most of the other discussion to have with the back half of the car is comprised of the body structure. They use way more high-strength steel. Even in the floor pan, they're using high-strength steel. They're using super high-strength steel in 29% of the body, which is over, I believe, 590 MPa. So there's so much thought and so many improvements in terms of adhesives, body coatings, weld design. The entire body structure has been improved, and that's really the main point and why you feel so good driving this car. But enough of that, let's take a look at the engine bay. Now, you may not be into this 2-liter. It's too much horsepower for you, and you may not want a manual transmission. Who drives those anymore? So you have the alternative of having the 1.5-liter turbo that's shared with the Honda Civic, and that has the special fuel and oil dilution issue that Honda has added to it for your pleasure. Now, you get a CVT with that, or you get a 6-speed manual, and that 6-speed manual is a carryover from the 2.4-liter in the previous generation. Now, the previous generation Accord had a 6-speed automatic. With the 2-liter, you jump up with 4 extra bonus gears to a 10-speed. Now, why you need 10 gears? Well, it's mostly for fuel economy. Are you ever gonna notice it? No, but from my experience, it's strange, but it gear hunts less than the 8-speed automatic that Acura had in their lineup. So what does all this mean? Well, the last part of this, I talked to the proprietor of Honda. If you're looking to tune this or do any types of modifications, he said that the 1.5-liter turbo has more overhead. You can get more horsepower and torque out of that from modifying it with just a simple tune and modifications than you can the 2-liter. So that might be something for you to think about if you're buying this long term. But as it stands, I could sit here all day and fiddle with this thing. Let's get it on the road and see how it drives. I've been waiting to drive the new Accord, and now I'm finally behind the wheel with the turbo and the manual transmission. So people want to know, this is a unicorn car. I've said it before, there's not going to be a lot of these, and manual transmissions are disappearing. In the mid-sized car market, you can pretty much forget it. So how does it feel? Well, the first thing you know is the Accord is a lot more isolated, a lot more quiet than the Accords of previous generation. You basically hear nothing from the engine here, and granted, there's more vibration from this than there was from the V6. I think that's going to be the main thing you're going to notice. But everything else feels so high quality. Your steering feel, or the steering wheel in general, you get a sense of almost like entry-level luxury car from this Accord. The seats are, there's a lot of give, there's a lot of plushiness in the armrest. Everything makes you feel so comfortable, and I think that's the main takeaway. Now, like most Hondas, there is some tire noise from this. I think that's about the only complaint in terms of NVH that I'm picking up on, but this is probably the lightest feeling, despite it being the largest of pretty much every Accord. It's just enjoyable to drive as a cruiser. I think in terms of suspension, most people are going to wonder what the ride quality is like. Have they turned it into a boat? And that was kind of what I was curious about. And I think they maintain a really good nimbleness that Hondas have always been known for in the Accord. And because you have a 4-popper here instead of the V6, and the V6, you know, and I've owned them, they felt so so nose heavy that all you did was understeer. It was like you needed 6 degrees of negative camber and like R compounds on the front just to get grip. You don't feel that here. You do feel a sense that you can tear this up if you wanted to. Now, because you have so much torque from the turbo, this motor and trans, you kind of wonder how the stability control handles it. It does a pretty good job. It's a little hyperactive because, of course, you have so much torque. Brakes are typical Honda stuff, kind of touchy. But this is, I would say it's probably the best Accord ever in terms of handling and drivability on the street, of course. You do get this strong sense that you can really drive this harder than the car is capable of. And it's when you get to that 7 or 8 tenths, that's when it starts to kind of understeer and you feel the, you know, the stability control constantly cutting power, cutting torque from the engine. But everybody wants to know, what is it like? You know, we've talked about this, people have talked about it, V6 versus Turbo 4. The Turbo 4 is faster, but in the real world, what does that mean? Stability control, traction control comes in right away. Even comes in over coming off a little crest. I will say this, it has that same type of tone that I heard in the Type R and even the RDX. It just doesn't have as much thrust. It doesn't have that constant pull that those cars do, which you can tell it's been detuned and, you know, obviously dumbed down for the Accord. This is not trying to be a sports car. I think there's 2 negatives here. One, there's too much torque for this type of front-wheel drive architecture, so it's heavily leaning on the stability and traction control system, and it's always coming in, which isn't really a bad thing because if you're unknowing, you probably would never notice it happening. The other thing is, in terms of body control, they've tuned this vehicle a little bit more soft, and that's not really this is exactly what you want, but there is this disconnected feeling that you get if you have to make a sudden maneuver at speed. So for example, if I'm just plodding along here, 45, 50, and I have to make a sudden turn, there is a huge delay between when the front turns and the back starts to follow, and it's just indicative of how they set up the suspension. I almost wish that they had some adaptive suspension here, or I hate to say this, but some other option for you, either aftermarket from Honda, their Honda factory performance parts, to kind of stiffen up this car a little bit to make it a little bit more responsive, especially for the manual transmission option. But I know they don't sell enough of these and it's not even worth their time. And I think the last thing I can really talk about is the shifter. It feels like the same cable operated shifter that you'd find in a Civic. It's very vague, very plasticky, very indirect. There's no mechanical feel here. It's super isolated. You feel nothing through the linkage to the transmission. It's just a glorified video game shifter at this point. I'm not kidding you. Like, if you get into some of the newer video game shifters, those are better than this. That's how disconnected it is. But the throws are direct, and thank God there is a manual option. So as much as this isn't going to be the most rewarding shifter feel that you're going to find, it works well. Again, it's pretty enjoyable to drive this overall. Let's get into the final thoughts, and I'm going to go into some of the more the nuances of everything I've talked about. Final thoughts on the new Accord. As the title suggests, it's the right car at the wrong time. And you can't even blame Honda for this one. It's almost impossible to predict consumer trends. In America, people have moved away from the sedan to SUVs and CUVs. And I've been in all these vehicles, and I don't get it. Most of them are not nearly as good as the Accord in drivability, ride quality, resale value, interior design. I mean, I could go on and on. But here it is. The pros are this. The interior space is amazing on the new Accord. They fixed everything that they had wrong with the previous generation. You could be a hippopotamus and still fit in here. You could have the body type of a ferret and still get comfortable. You could literally fit 4 adults in a bunch of cargo and still have room. The cup holder design, the storage nooks and crannies are great. The ergonomics in terms of knobs, buttons, and switches are the best they've ever been. They fixed everything from the previous generations. Even the infotainment can be updated over the air. The base audio system is really good in here, and they've benchmarked it to, like, let's say the competition. It's better than the base audio systems in competition like Toyota and Nissan. And I would say you wouldn't have to pay to upgrade this car to the more premium audio system, and you still get a good experience. You can see the test results here, of course. But now it's time to get into the cons. As much as this car is so refined, the body structure is the best it's ever been, it has the lowest road noise, the Sport with the manual transmission feels far too soft. And I had this conversation with my Honda rep, Jessica, about it. If you're gonna make a niche car with a manual trans, it should be more like the Honda Civic Si. It needs adaptive dampers. It's too soft. It's disconnected feeling when you drive it hard. And that's fine on the regular Accord, but you just constantly feel like you're being held back by how soft they made it, including the stability and traction control. You're always hitting it. You're always feeling the power being cut out when you're turning or you're starting to drive fast. So, that's something for them to think of going forward, and I doubt they're gonna do it, because by default, if you want a manual transmission sedan, they're pretty much non-existent anymore. So, again, it's back to the pros and cons of this. Your resale is going to be great. You're going to be able to flip the Accord. It's a safe car to finance because you're not going to lose your ass on it. And that alone is one of the biggest reasons to buy this car, among other things. I don't love the performance, but I love so many of the other things about it, and I hope Honda continues to invest in improving their cars. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
It's getting hot out there, real hot. When it's this hot, it's hard to crank. You could be cranking all night. Oh yeah. It's hard to crank. We got something for you. We got jungle power. He's gonna put jungle power in all by himself. Look at that. Oh yeah. Don't worry about how we do our job. We've done this before, trust me. Check this out. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right there. This guy. He knows how to work equipment. This guy knows how to work his equipment. Check it out. How straight do you want it?
We'd like it straight.
You think you're straight? We'll get it straight. Ooh, get ready. Here it comes. You want it? There's only one way to get it. Unfriend, unsubscribe, everything to Savage Geese. Ugh, gross. Makes me sick.